The book of the book of Psalms, chapter 2. That's crazy. It's the book of Psalms, chapter 2, verse what? And it reads, "The reign of the Lord's anointed." Verse 1, "Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing?" Verse 2, "The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai and against his anointed." Verse 3, "Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us." Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is these heathen nations supposed to be pretty much up under us, in servitude. But because we went off, by breaking the covenant with our everlasting power, holy power, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, we are subject to, the curses being basically put in a lower state, which is ultimately all set up from the get-go, because you got to think about it, to really appreciate rulership, you have to be subjected to wickedness. And, that's why the kingdom of heaven is going to be so great. The things that we complain about, the things that we can't stand to look upon here in Babylon the Great, they'll be unheard of. They won't go on in the kingdom. Like, like the elder was bringing out, look at how society is set up. You got individuals that literally are, people don't even take vacations anymore. You know what I mean? like what the fuck? You know what I mean? And then this man's mindset is to even put more hell on the people, because he's talking about you will own nothing and be happy. Verse 4, "He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision." And it's the Most High, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, put them in derision right now. These people, are through. Like the beloved elder said, he said, the heathen through, everybody through, 2/3 through. The only individuals on the planet that's pretty much, in hope and confidence and faith is, the believers, the hopeful elect. With all these calamities that's coming on the planet, we actually have the understanding that these things are needful and serve a purpose, ultimately to fulfill prophecy, And like I said, before it gets better, it's going to get worse, But, like the elders was breaking down, Yahweh Shah being that new day, the morning star, Esau Edom being in midnight, we watching the end of his rulership, and that new day, that new dawn, Yahweh Shai, in the kingdom of heaven. So I want to start off by giving all praise, all honor, and all glory to Kol Elohim La Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem HaKodash. I want to say double honors to the elders and to the apostles that taught me this truth. Peace and salutations to the Akim across the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth with faith and with sincerity, as well as risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever. Shalom to the Akim and the Aqua, thought they're listening and learning, Lord willingly. This is edifying. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners scattered abroad in the land of other nations, appearing like the other nations, but who subscribe to this truth. To you, I say shalom. So, Brother Yawasop, coming at you with another lesson through the Spirit and through the power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua. This lesson is inspired by this article that I saw this morning. I didn't have time to really do a video, but just showing you, that's what, like I came out with Psalms chapter 2, because it talk about how the heathen pretty much, they think they got next. They think after Esau Edom's fall, which they don't understand, Esau Edom has a whole plan. He's trying to, it tells you in the book of Daniel about how, pretty much the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of man and put whomever he will in the positions of power. Well, this devil doesn't want to pretty much relinquish his power, so he's trying to put a system in place, trying to carnally do something how are you going to carnally fight against something spiritual? And I was listening to the beloved elder apostle say that recently. The spirit is unconquerable, undefeatable, you know what I mean? Like the elder was saying, you got all these people that came up and bucked against the men of the Lord, I believe those are the prophets. And look at what happened to them. I was there when the elder, pretty much, did a video about Polite, and rightfully so. I know, pretty much that, because that's the Lord judging, the elders' enemies. You got to remember, and when you take time to think about it, like, you know, this world is about to be turned against the true believers. So in actuality, the whole world is about to be enemies to the truth, you know, because we don't line up with their narrative. You know what I mean? They about to try to get you to believe and worship technology. Like, it says China has a message for Trump. The U.S. won't stop its rise. And that's funny because, yeah, the U.S. won't, but Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua will. These heathen nations believe that they have next. As U.S. President Donald Trump ratcheted up economic pressure on China over the past week, Beijing sent back its own message: its rise won't be interrupted. And, like the elder said, if you follow history, all trade wars lead to real wars. So, I mean, like, I believe they said that China pretty much start doing military exercises because eventually I believe they want to invade Taiwan, Taiwan is a partner to Babylon the Great, aka America. But like they were saying, pretty much, your microchips that pretty much power like a lot of cell phones, all these different things, this technology, these devices, a lot of them are made in Taiwan. And I remember a couple of years ago they was talking about building a microchip factory here with one of the partners of Taiwan. That was a couple of years ago. Now I didn't realize that those were pretty much the microchips for phones and whatnot. So you don't think that's about to upset China when Taiwan at one point in time was part of China, just like Ukraine was at one point in time part of Russia? It says a major political meeting taking place in capital was the ideal backdrop for Beijing to respond. The two sessions gathering of China's rubber stamp legislature and its top political advisory body is where the government reveals its plans and sets the tone for the year ahead. The top item on its priority list: boosting consumer demand to ensure China doesn't need to rely on the exports to power its vast, slowing economy. And at the end of the day, you got to remember they all in cahoots because you got different individuals in all these governments. Ultimately, they all just jockeying for position because, at the end of the day, this is the way that the elites are pushing society, where pretty much all, nations is going to be technocracies, pretty much. We can prevail over any difficulty in pursuing development, China's number 2 official Li Qiang told thousands of delegates seated in Beijing's Great Hall of the People at the opening meeting of the National People's Congress Wednesday. The giant ship of China's economy will sail steadily toward the future, he said. So, which, again, you got to remember, China and Russia are in cahoots, and pretty much, although they get sanctioned by, the NATO or the EU, pretty much, they have created the BRICS to circumvent, the sanctions of Babylon the Great as well as the EU. So, believe it or not, this trade war is going to affect all the countries, but it's going to affect Babylon the Great the most because Babylon the Great doesn't produce anything. So it's like they're killing two birds with one stone. But, you got to think about it. These nations are always been set against you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians, Lord's chosen people. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 83. I'm going to start at verse 1, and it reads, a song or psalm of Asaph. Keep not thou silence, O power. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O power. Verse 2, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head, which is the other nations, to make a loud sound. Hamah, by implication, to be in great commotion or rage. Because at the end of the day, all the nations conspired to pretty much put Israel, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians in the position that we are in. So we can never, pretty much, you got to think about it. This system is set up to utilize Jake, but never to really let Jake advance. And if they advance, you got to do some wickedness to advance, So, like when you take time to think about it, like I often bring it up, I remember growing up, in our neighborhoods, Jake neighborhoods, is every other nationality. Ishmael, I didn't even seen Hamites. Some of them Hamites might have been Jake, but, Hamites, you going to have East Indians, all these different nations in your neighborhoods collecting the resources there and then taking it out of the neighborhood. And that's why Jake's neighborhoods look so fucking downtrodden. Verse 3, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, and they are confederate against thee. And when you go into the word confederate, it's bireth, and it says a compact because made by passing between pieces of flesh. Confederacy, covenant. So they pretty much made a covenant with one another. Like how those men pretty much had made a covenant to pretty much kill Paul. They took an oath, or they said they pretty much was gonna kill Paul, but the Lord, was intervening on Paul's behalf. So that's pretty much with these nations as well, And then it goes into, verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes. I think the Hagarenes are like Ishmaelites as well. But Moab is, the so-called Chinese. And then you says Amalek, Jabal, Ammon, which is the Japanese, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. So pretty much, like I said, I think the Midianites are also like Ishmaelites. So pretty much all the nations are against, the Israelites. You can even see that to this day. Like Ishmael might help Jake, but they'll help them at Jake's at the demise of Jake. I remember Ishmael bringing shit in the hood, and they'll maybe put one or a few Jakes, so probably just one. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, they making money off of Jake. Jake taking all the risks, they making the money and sitting back being quiet. You know what I mean? But then a lot of since you could see some Ishmaelites be Jake though. Like I grew up around some Ishmaelites that they was too cool. They embraced Jake, so like they probably was Jake. Um, the book of Psalms, chapter 21. I'm going to start at verse 10, and it reads, their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men. Verse 11, Psalms 21 and 11, for they intended evil against thee. They imagined a mischievous device which they are not able to perform. Which ultimately, that mischievous device is this NWO, this system, this beast system, where they're going to try to put an implantable device. Charagma is, that sea hip, that grain of rice. They're going to try to put that in your body, so they can track, trace, and pretty much, even they say to the point of even try to control you, which make a lot of sense because when you go into the one guy, I can't think of the guy's name, but I think his name was Garcia, but he helped create, because it wasn't just one person that came up with the chip technology. It was a few different people, and they probably just added on. But I remember one of the guys pretty much put a device inside of a bull, and the bull was in mid-charge. He was able to hit the button, and the bull stopped. So, who's to say what all this technology going to be able and capable to do? That's why the scriptures is so adamant about not pretty much partaking in it, to the point of to the point of giving up your life. You know what I mean? And some individuals are going to have to, trust in the Lord and pretty much be those, scriptures talk about in the book of Romans chapter 12, a living sacrifice, you know. Some of us going to have to be. Now, of course, everybody's not going to be. That's ultimately the will of the Lord. But, those that are actually set up to get a life, the Lord's going to have the spirit on them to do that. You got to think about all these different things, Jake sitting up there thinking about, you just automatically get on the chair and some, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what your lot is, and the Lord gonna shake some shit up again, you know what I mean? Like this thing, but, I'd rather trust in the Lord, what Job say? Though he slay me, I'd rather trust in the Lord, roughly paraphrase, So ultimately the evil intent is to get everybody sea-hipped, along with the different nations. Did I get that? Salakia. Psalms, what was that, 21? Because I think it talked about the day of the oven or something like that. That wasn't it. Let me try Psalms 46, verse. It's the book of Psalms, chapter 46 and verse 5. The Most High is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. The Most High shall help her, and that right early. The heathen raged. The kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice. The earth melted. Verse 7. The Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua of hosts is with us. The power of Jacob is our refuge. And rightfully so. The Lord is allowing these devils to bring forth their agenda to a degree, but it tells you what's that in the book of Job, that in sufficiency, he gonna be heading straight. So once he get this thing set up the way he think that's going pretty much secure his victory, the Lord is going pretty much bring him low. He bring him down. It says the Most High is in the midst of her. Who is the her? His elect, because the elect are considered or looked upon like a comely woman to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, or to Yahushua Mashiach, who you people ignorantly call Jesus Christ. Scriptures tell you, these heathen think they got next, but the scriptures tell you that pretty much, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, the kingdom of, heaven, is going to be an everlasting rulership. This is the book of 2 Samuel chapter 7, and the point is verse 16. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. For verse 17, according to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. Then, well, the point was, what is the point? It says, in thine house, the house of David, the elect is going to have an everlasting rulership. Verse 16 again, 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 16, and thine house and thine kingdom shall be established forever. Before thee, thine throne shall be established forever. So ultimately, these, heathen think they got next. Esau think he going to rule forever, but the Lord is going to upset him. The Lord is going to, basically take him out of his rulership. Like the elder brought out at the end of the day, no kingdom pretty much, has went beyond, 250 years. And I believe they was talking about how DJ Trump is trying to make a $250 bill. There's a lot of things they do mockery in front of the eyes of the people, because the people are sheeple. People don't have any common sense. People don't, out of a room of 100 people. I was thinking about this shit because I was going to take my children out of school. They was telling me about how pretty much, they're reading to them some bullshit. That was one of the reasons why I homeschooled my children. We sitting up there talking about, they reading stories where a girl and the girl is, and I'm like, well, damn, do you realize what they're doing? And then she said how a little girl was in there talking about she liked girls. Mind you, these kids ain't even in the fucking 6th grade yet. This is an evil fucking place, man. And, I try to tell my children to think, you know what I mean? So, you got to be careful with what you say and what people perceive and think and whatnot. But if they say something, that was the will of the Lord. But, just imagine, like, they got a father around. Just imagine all the families in the households that don't. That these children are sucking this shit up. That's why the Lord got to come back and destroy this place quickly. So back in Psalm chapter 2 and verse 4 again, he that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. He's going to laugh at the heathen, thinking that they got next. Verse 5, then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore pleasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. Because the scriptures tell you that King David is going to, pretty much be put back in the rulership, because everything reincarnates. First is going to be, Yahweh Shah Mashiach, our Lord and Savior, our big brother. Then it's going to be King David. And then up under him is going to be the 144,000 judges. Verse 7, I will declare the decree, the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua hath said unto me, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Verse 8, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. I'm going to reread this in the NLT. So individuals like that demon vocab and, these different Christian so-called scholars that set up to try to come against the truth, while they make it seem like it's such a wicked, evil thing, but it was no wicked, evil thing when you had our forefathers into slavery. The only reason why it's wicked now is because we tell you that, by the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, all nations have went into captivity, and your ass going into captivity. That's why you had individuals like Robert Kennedy make the statement about, like he said, if the Lord being a so-called, black man and a just power, and him fearing that because they put, Jake or Israel, so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians into slavery, that they'll have to go into slavery. And the scriptures say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Roughly paraphrased. So, Psalm chapter 2 and verse 8, only ask and I will give you the nations as your inheritance, the whole earth as your possession. Let's look at that word inheritance real quick. I got like 3 minutes, and I want to get that real quick.
Strong's H 5159. Nachala.
It says possession, property. Your property. Your property. Just like so-called the property of these. They're not white people. But it says, verse 9, thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, like they tried to break, the nation of Israel, so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians. But to show you that we weren't broken, because the Lord is giving us back our inheritance now. He's letting us know who we are as a nation of people. And, again, after coming to the, the understanding of the truth, we're watching this place slowly. Well, it seemed like it's speeding up for real. Like so many different things are happening. I was just watching the beloved elder do a video, and he was going into like pretty much Dabu said up here said, yeah, by especially when the Lord, give his elect those spiritual powers. You're going to have Superman walking the earth. What do Elon Musk say? Uberman. So, yeah, the heathen raging for a vain thing, because ultimately they don't have necks. They got captivity, So if you're so-called black, Hispanic, Native American, Seminole Indian, West Indian, or Haitian, I implore you to come back to the laws, to the statutes, and to the commandments of your power, whose true name in the Paleo Hebrew is Yahweh, Hashem Yahushua, or you will be destroyed. With that, I want to give all praise. I want to give all honor. I want to give all glory to call Haloyim La Yahweh, Hashem Yahushua, Hashem. I want to say double honors to the elders, the apostles that taught me this truth. Peace and salutations to the Akim across the four corners of the earth, pushing the truth with faith and with sincerity, as well as risking their lives and the freedom to do so now more so than ever. Shalom to the Akim and the Aqua, thought they're listening and learning. Lord willing, this is edifying. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners scattered abroad in the land of other nations, appearing like the other nations, but subscribing to this truth. To you, I say shalom. Till next time, Lord willingly. Shalom, shalom. Kwam Yasharallah. Walk Ball.